one of the things that drew me to this shirt, other than this is made with plastic bottles.
It is?
Yeah, look at the back.
You are so woke.
I am, well, no, I'm just a regular Costco shopper. That's all. Well, this is made from plastic.
Huh? Yeah, I see. Hi, Pix. Pix?
I'm sure this can get here.
You either.
Look up Costco.
Okay, we're going to begin pretty soon, so everyone come join the tent circus.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, it takes a lot to herd cats. Kathy, you going to join us?
Oh, there's a chair there.
A cushion. Too special.
Kathy, are you going to join us? Are you, huh? Oh, okay, all right. Oh, good morning, everyone. Can you hear me online? Okay. Wow, this is a wonderful gathering of friends. Seems like everyone that needs to be here is here. I wanted to have a conversation with you this morning. It's almost Thanksgiving. Some of you will go home and have conversations over Thanksgiving dinner with your family. And you'll have, what will you talk about? Sports. Now, I hardly ever watch sports, but I watched the Bulls basketball game last night. And they started out in the first quarter, they were behind the Miami Heat by, it was like 20-1. And I'm thinking, wow, I know now why I don't watch the Bulls basketball, because this is depressing. They ended up coming back and winning the game by 6 points. It's really fun. So you might talk about sports or the weather or global warming or things that are in the news, right? This is what we have conversations about. So I'd like to have a different kind of conversation here this morning, and I'm going to frame it and use Cohen's possibly, but I want to have a conversation with you about, and this is how I'd like to frame it. We lack nothing. You absolutely lack nothing. There is nothing lacking in you. And we are all broken. So each moment we have here together is precious. Can we have a conversation about this? How would we have a conversation about this? We'd probably want to look at some koans. Now, it might seem intimidating to have a conversation about something like this. Well, I'm just guessing that this is the conversation we actually are longing to have. And we don't know how to have it. So anyone want to start the conversation? Any brave people?
Thank you, Roshi, and it's good to be here and good to see all these. Oh, okay. Good morning, and nice to see all these faces here. It's really quite a turnout. I guess I first have a question for you. Why would you say we're all broken?
We're already broken.
So why do you say that?
Fading in the photographs. Well, as one teacher said, this cup right here, I like this cup. I have green tea, and it's already broken. One of these days, I'm going to hit it by accident with my elbow and knock it on the floor, and it'll break. Because I know it's already broken, each moment I have with this cup is precious. And we, like the cup, are already broken. We're also going to fall and break. Aren't we? Don't we know this?
Well, I would use a different word than broken, but yes.
Well, what word would you use?
I'm just reading a book, finished reading a book. Its title is Impermanent, and it's got a secondary title. But impermanent because the cup will change, we will change. The cup won't be here one day, and we, at least physically, won't be here one day.
Okay. Yes. And yet we forget that really easily, don't we? We don't like to think about that too much. I'm not sure we can even imagine our own death. There's something in us that finds it very hard to actually see that or acknowledge it. Other people are going to die, but not me. But remember, the other part of this conversation is we lack nothing. There's nothing missing here.
I think for me, once admitting that we lack for nothing, but we're all broken, for me, the next step is to go, and that's okay. And because for me, part of the path that I've been on, and particularly, this is the first time I'm saying anything out loud about the retreat, I came face to face with death for 5 days at Auschwitz-Birkenau. And what I found was, after bearing witness to it for the first couple of days, I then felt guilty for seeing the beauty there. It was a beautiful sunset, day 3. It was like, how can I feel, no, it's okay. And for me, coming to grips with my brokenness as well as my wholeness underneath that is critical, in that I no longer feel like it's a pathology. It's just level set. And that for me has been critical in coming to grips with that space.
Yeah, so we could feel guilty for feeling joy when we're in a place like Auschwitz, where there's so much unimaginable suffering took place.
Yeah, and you come face to face, as we were discussing earlier, with our own identities and our separateness there, because it was a place built on separateness. As simply, and the scary part is it's simply part of the flawed 20th century movement towards political utopia that simply needed to get rid of all of the impure and others. Okay, if we can just get rid of all of them, the rest of us will be so happy. And that was just the 20th century will be known for that, you know. And so knowing that inherent brokenness is not something to feel guilty about or shame about, for me has been the singly healing.
Well, what's that theory they call now, the blood, about, pure blood? There's some way that people talk about this that gives rise to fascism. There's national Christian, I don't want to get into politics here too much, but
if we're talking about Thanksgiving, politics will be there.
Clearly our culture is divided, and we divide each other and we scapegoat others, and a lot of the, I think, meditation that Bernie had on Auschwitz and why he kept coming back there, he was meditating on how we other.
And for me, it was simply othering I was othering myself. I walked in to Auschwitz, I was a Jew, okay? And I'm supposed to feel a certain way. And I'm supposed to feel a certain way about the summer commandos or the Scheisse commandos or the guards or Dr. Mengele himself. I'm supposed to feel a certain way. And you have to allow yourself to feel how you feel.
So we get stereotyped by our identity group, whatever it is.
That's what and coming to grips with that's okay too. It's easier to say my brokenness is okay than to say coming face to face with my identity is okay too.
Yeah, so the other thing I'm hearing here about brokenness is not only are we broken in that we are going to die, but we're all broken in some ways psychologically. We all have what we feel are inadequacies and things about our upbringing that we suffer, and we have shame and guilt and all of that stuff. That's broken, and yet we're also, nothing is missing. That's the paradox, I think, that Zen presents us, is that we might pathologize and feel inadequate because we're neurotic, but isn't that just part of the human condition? We're all a little strange. Maybe that's what makes us lovable. I mean, have you ever met a perfect person that didn't have any neurosis? You ever met anyone like that? Only at a distance. You gotta move the microphone around because we're hybrid, so we have to. Yeah. So Chris said only at a distance has she met someone that's perfect.
Do you want to? So I just want to talk what you said about Auschwitz. I'm from Poland, so that topic it's so close to my heart, and I went there myself a few years ago, and actually when I went there it was really cold. It was snowing, it was freezing, and I was thinking, wow, it's so cold, I don't know if I can do this. It was really freezing, and I kept thinking too, how can I even think that way? There were people there, when you see that wall when they were killing people, and there were people no clothes there in the same conditions, and I felt oh my God, we're so privileged in our life that we don't have that gratitude that, oh, I'm too cold, I should hide, I'm not gonna go to the rest of the tour. So that was one thing of I don't know if it's broken, but I think it's more about the gratitude and really empathy towards what the people were feeling. But another thing that comes up for me when I like hear broken is like a label, in a sense, like somebody named those people broken and made other people believe in it and was successful in that. And then the other people started believing they are broken and they are lacking, and they started killing and being hostile. And that's just like deep, very deep sadness, and like it's unbelievable that could actually happen. But then I'm thinking in a daily life, like I kept thinking when you say broken and lacking about my son, like he has certain challenges, but then because there are certain social norms, people keep saying like, oh, maybe there is something wrong with him, maybe there is nothing wrong with him. And I always keep asking, why don't you just think that he's different? Like that he's different, but he's still normal. You know, why do we keep saying that normal has to be our normal, that if it doesn't fit in a certain category, we are broken? So that's kind of what came up for me.
I'm gonna get a table and put that microphone in the middle of the room, so. So anyone online want to jump in, contribute to the conversation? Yeah, I see, Robin, have you got your hand raised? I see a, no, your hand is raised on your screen.
Roshi,
All
I
right.
can say
Yeah.
something. MG.
MG, yeah.
When you said broken, that resonated with me immediately because I have had really extreme health issues. I don't, as we're speaking about labels and labeling ourselves, I guess one label for me could be long COVID. I had a 6-month period, which some of you know about, where I was developed allergies to foods, all fruits and all vegetables, which meant that particularly raw. So I couldn't eat them for 2 years, like no fruits, no vegetables. This affected my job, where I could work or not work. And it's very easy to feel your brokenness on a nuts and bolts cellular level. And also, as someone had mentioned, facing mortality during the last session or the last bearing witness retreat. I felt that on a personal level because at the time no one knew what COVID was capable of, and my immunologist didn't know whether I was going into actual anaphylaxis or not. So my body was having reactions as if head to toe, I could go into anaphylaxis at any moment. So I had to be very careful, and I was extremely bitter for 6 months. But when you said you started with, we have everything inside, or we have everything we need, that is also true. I find that to also be true, integrating some of the conversation around our circle. I think that you adjust. We have a saying in our family that there are 5 ways to be happy. It's what we used to tell our son when he was little. If he didn't get what he wanted, well, then find the other 5 ways or the other 4 ways. I totally made it up. To make it be easier. Then I found I had to apply that to myself. I think Roshi June knows, I've spoken to her about this, that my plate became my world in a way. And so what I could eat was chicken, salt, olive oil, eggs at the time. And you become very aware that another life is sustaining you. I was so grateful to those chickens, and they're all female too. which is blew my mind to realize, like, I owe my sustenance to the life of this chicken, which meant this chicken ate grains or whatever she ate, which means the sun, the rain, the hands that fed. I mean, talk about interconnection, and like everything that you need is there. But it opened a kind of awareness at the same time as being incredibly bitter about my circumstances. And that pops up from time to time. So I think this koan is very alive. So thank you for bringing it to us, Roshi.
Thank you, MG. Yeah, many of you have had COVID now. I know, MG, you've been struggling with the long version of that. So, you know, this brings up a koan to mind. Someone asked Master Ma, he was unwell, he was close to dying, and they asked him how he was doing, and he said, sun-faced Buddha, moon-faced Buddha. Speaking of ways to be happy, you can make those up if you're a parent and you have the authority to do so. That's great. Yeah. In our tradition, we have 4 ways of being happy, called the 4 Brahma Viharas. Metta, loving kindness, or we could say goodwill, compassion, empathetic joy, and equanimity. The whole thing starts with loving kindness. Gotta have goodwill. If we have goodwill, and I think everyone knows enough about this practice to know that it begins with loving kindness towards yourself and towards others. If you have goodwill, then when goodwill experiences suffering, what arises is compassion. When goodwill experiences happiness, what arises is empathetic joy. And then equanimity is there to even the whole thing out in case we get confused. Could there be 4 better ways to be happy? So if we are creatures of habit, so we can lose our intention, but if we start with an intention of strong loving kindness and goodwill towards ourselves and others, then it seems to me what's here generally is the 4 Brahma Viharas. But I have to be careful. We all suffer. I mean, we all have despair, and we're living in dark times. People have been traumatized. People are depressed. There's addiction, there's suicide, there's all kinds of suffering here. Be careful we're not discounting that by saying that nothing is lacking, that everything is broken. These teachings are subtle. Well, let me, since no one's saying anything, I'll say another koan. This is a pretty good one to start with. I put it up on our online site. It's called Ordinary Mind is the Way. Joshu earnestly asked Nansen, what is the way? Understand that Chan, or Zen, grew out of the happy confluence and marriage of Mahayana Buddhism and Taoism. And so the teaching in Taoism was to be in accord with the way was the point. And then that got translated later into the Buddha way. But the way we translate that here at our Zen Center is the Buddha Tao, to remind ourselves that it's not some special attribute of Buddhism. It's actually it's this wonderful marriage of Mahayana Buddhism and Taoism that brought forth our tradition. So Joshu is asking his teacher, Nansen, what is the way? Nansen answered, the ordinary mind is the way. Joshu asked, should I direct myself toward it or not? That's a good question. Don't we all have that question? Is it something I need to do? Nansen said, if you try to turn toward it, you go against it. You go against it. If you try to turn toward it, you go against it. Well, Joshu's not going to be satisfied with that. He's right here in the conversation. So he says, if you do not try to turn toward it, how can I know that it is the way? Isn't that the question we would all ask? If you're a 7-year-old, you would ask this question. 7-year-olds always ask good questions. They ask the most obvious good question. As we get to be adults, we get more, we don't even know how to ask good questions anymore. Joshu's asking a good question. If I do not try to turn toward it, how can I know that it's the way? Nansen says, the way does not belong to knowing or not knowing. Wow. Knowing is delusion. Not knowing is a blank consciousness. Oh, what's this guy talking about? When you have really reached the true way beyond all doubt, you will find it as vast and boundless as the great empty firmament. How can it be talked about on the level of right and wrong? And at these words, Joshu was suddenly enlightened. And the verse to this is, by the way, the 19th case from the Gateless Gate, Mumonkan. The spring flowers, the moon in autumn, the cool breezes of summer, the winter's snow. If idle concerns do not cloud the mind, this is man's happiest season. Yeah. The spring flowers, the moon in autumn, the cool breezes of summer, the winter snow. If idle concerns do not cloud the mind, this is man's happiest season. Yeah.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody. I'm Shishin. Not knowing. So what do we do with not knowing? What do? I bear witness. And that's the breakdown right there, right? Gonna bear witness, and then I want to throw in my ideas, right? I want to throw in my ideas, and that just takes everything away from bearing witness, which is what I think, at least for me, at this moment, that koan is about, but that might change tomorrow, I wanted to say something about, go on.
Well, can I ask you a question about that? Because that's interesting, Shishin. Is it
Which?
possible to throw in ideas without being attached to them? That would almost be like thinking without thinking.
Not thinking.
But we don't usually when we throw in an idea, we're pretty attached to our idea.
Fukan Zenji, we talk about not thinking, non-thinking.
Yeah.
When we sit down, we are non-thinking, but as soon as we start to think, everything gets bollocksed. I like that word today. Bollocksed. Bollocksed. But can I go back to we're all broken? I have had for, I'm being very personal here now. I have had for years and years a problem with anger. And I'm working with my anger continually. And lately, at the end of my sitting practice, my zazen, I think to myself and say to myself, may all beings be well, may all beings be happy, may all beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they all live in equanimity, free from judgment and anger, free from attachment and aversion. And when I was listening to you about brokenness, I thought, you know, attachment, we're broken, we're attached to stuff. Aversion, why do we want to be, you know, your points about not Dachau, Auschwitz. I was at Dachau once, so you know, I share that. And your points about aversion are right, and your son, they're perfect for me. I totally understand. When we have aversion, we are broken. We see brokenness, and we are broken. And of course, anger, that's brokenness right at its core. And judgment, that's what happens when we are in the situation of trying to be not knowing, and then we think we know. So I think this is all a beautiful confluence this morning. Thank you.
Anger can destroy trust in relationships of love that have flowered for years and years.
I have just a really brief comment to say that that verse elicits in me, what do we call a tender,
Tenderhearted,
yeah, the tender sad heart or something?
yeah.
Bodhicitta, yeah, that's what it kind of elicits in me. That when I can be open like that, there's something very tender and something very sad too. It's hard to explain, but
I don't think you have to explain it.
yeah.
I think,
it's a beautiful space to be in.
yeah, we call this sad and tender heart bodhicitta. It's the source of our bodhisattva vow. And the Poles have a saying, the only open heart is a broken heart. So if we bear witness, then we're willing to have our heart broken wide open. Wide open. Where's the judgment there? Really? No room for any judgment, evaluation, critique, right and wrong. So this, what he says in the koan is that not knowing is not a blank consciousness is an important thing to appreciate, because in the Zen tradition, we could exaggerate the difference, but there were two main schools, the Soto and the Rinzai, and they had a kind of running debate between each other. It's probably had more in common than they had differences, but so I'm oversimplifying the differences, but the Rinzai folks were critical of the Soto because Soto folks were just into sitting, shikantaza, sitting and being in harmony with everything, being at peace. And the Rinzai people felt that was a kind of quieistic practice. It was too passive. You need to, get yourself going and have a more active inquiry about everything. And so the whole Rinzai practice was much more physical and pushing in its style. And so that notion that not knowing is not blank consciousness as a kind of critique coming from the Rinzai tradition. That not knowing is it's not the end. It's just the opening. It's just opening the Dharma door, so to speak. But if you think that's the end of practice, then you're really stuck in a kind of quietic place. That is not the point at all. And yeah, so you're getting the. So in the koan tradition that comes through our white plum, we study the gateless, to do complete koan study in the white plum tradition. We study 50 koans in the Mumonkan. Then we study 100 koans in the Blue Cliff Record, and another 100 koans in the Book of Serenity, and then another about 50 in the Denkoroku, and then the 5 ranks of Tozan. So that ends up being about a little over 300 koans. And then when we, in the early days, some of us did koan study with Kori Roshi, who was one of Maizumi Roshi's teacher. And Kori Roshi had developed 200 koans, which in the early days I went through with Maizumi Roshi. And so that actually ends up being about 500 koans. But some of the koans that I give beginning students come from Kori Roshi's system, like how do you stop the sound of a temple bell? There's another one that's similar. Well, I mean, there's another koan there that we did that's how do you stop the fighting across the river? How do you stop the fighting across the river? So let me just give you a little context about koans, because koans are just a beautiful part of our tradition, and you maybe don't feel that they're beautiful when you're working on them. Hardly anyone does. But when you reflect on them later, you might appreciate what you've been through with them. So I've told this story many times, but I think it really resonates with the time we're in. Chan grew out, the golden age of Chan grew out of the end of the Tang Dynasty, which was a time of a huge amount of chaos in China. They had the Lushan Rebellion, which happened for a decade. They brought in they outsourced their military to guard. China outsourced their military because they have a big border to guard. And these guys came in, these these mercenary soldiers from where the northern lands came in and guarded the borders. And then one day they just decided not to go home. They said, and then a civil war erupted, which lasted for 10 years. And according to the historical accounts, over a third of the Chinese population was killed. A third. War, famine, disease, murder, rape, pillage, starvation. 10 years of civil war. And out of that came two of the greatest Zen teachers in our tradition, Shitao and Mazu. And they had two different styles. Shitao's style gave birth to the Soto school, and Mazu's style, Baso's style, gave birth to the Rinzai line. So let me tell you a few things about these guys. So Shitao's way was to see that nothing is missing. It's all here. So a student would ask, and his style was very gentle. So a student would ask Shitao, what how can I be enlightened? And Shi Tao would say, what's stopping you? What's stopping you? How can I find the Pure Land? Where do you think the Pure Land is? How come you can't find it now? That kind of answer, yeah? And Ma Zu's style was a little rougher. Which is, he'd kick and hit people, and it was the same intention, just a different technique. He wanted to get someone's attention, and if they weren't looking in the right place, he'd give them a slap upside the head to get them to come and be present. It wasn't done out of anger, but there's lots of stories where, someone would come and ask Rinzai a question, and he'd just kick the guy and kick him down. And he'd fall down, and he'd wake, and he'd stand up laughing, being enlightened, Had Kensho right there on the spot. Now, so you say, this is like violent, these stories are violent, they're being kicked. If they did it here, they'd be sued, But it was China. It's a different culture. These are probably young men in monasteries, they're like 20 years old. They'd wrestle, it's a different, anyway, there were these two styles. So Shi Tao, so let me give you a couple of, Shi Tao composed, what is it? Song of the Grass Hut, which we have time, I'll read it to you. It's beautiful, beautiful little poem. We don't have a lot of koans from Shi Tao, but we have, but two ways of thinking about his teaching would be: we are everything we perceive, we are interwoven and not interwoven. And this interweaving continues on, while each thing stands in its own place. Shi Tao said, I'll build a grass hut where there's nothing of value. Though the hut is small, it includes the entire world. 10 square feet, I think that he says in the Song of the Grass Hut. And this 10 square feet is a measurement that comes from Vimalakirti Sutra, because Vimalakirti famously had only a 10-foot square room that he accommodated, like many hundreds of bodhisattvas all fit in, and they couldn't magically fit in. And so traditionally, the Doksan room in Zen monasteries is 10 square feet. Yeah. Shi Tao said, my teaching, which has come down from the ancient Buddhas, is not dependent on meditation or on diligent application of any kind. Nothing is missing. And we have mind is Buddha, and the Buddha is mind. That mind, Buddha, all sentient beings, Bodhi, enlightenment, kleshas are all one. No division. No special identity. No identity politics. So Mazu, you want to say anything about Shi Tao? Anyone? So this is how he responded to the darkness of his time. You can imagine, they lived in pretty dark times. We live in pretty dark times. Scary times we're living in. I watch a lot of news, and I'll sometimes tell June I can't stand it anymore. This is really just I can't stand it. But then our practice is to bear witness, and that's what Shitao did. He just bore witness to the suffering. He showed up. They walked out in those fields, burning fields, just walked out in the fields. Nothing is missing. It's all one. Well, that's some teaching. And then Mazu, they both lived about the same time. So Shitao, let's see, where does he come down from? Huinong, Seigen, Gyoshi, they all kind of come down from Huinong. But after Huinong, they each have different teachers. So Mazu, or Baso, his way was more physical, and his heirs included Linji Rinzai, who established the Rinzai school, along with Baizan. And we have a koan, Baizan's Fox, which is the second case in the Gateless Gate. We could appreciate if we have time. Wangbo, Gobblers of Dregs is a koan we have of Wangbos. So when Baizan asked Mazu what's the essence of his teaching, he replied, "It's just the place where you let go of your body and your life." So a koan here is to advance from where you can no longer advance, and to do what you can no longer be done. You must make yourself into a raft or a ferry boat for others. I think this was what Buddha discovered. He discovered two things. He discovered that we suffer, and he named it. It's noble because he named it. Something powerful about words and naming things. The name, suffering is our common existential human condition. And he said we suffer because of we grasp. Second noble truth. But then the next discovery he made was we can live a large, inspired life in the service of others. To live such a generous life based on gratitude and love can heal our suffering. If we bear witness, then what comes from that is loving action. It's our Zen path. That is our tradition, to come back into the world. And both of these teachers, both of their teachings were not about ignoring the darkness of their time. It's not about turning away from it. It was not about fixing it either, though, because some things aren't fixable. You want to fix our politics? Go ahead, run for office. The whole meaning of your life is in the current matter. You think, what's the current matter? That's the current matter, whatever you're thinking. So we have several koans in, I think I could find them here, but some of you have worked on these. These are from Mazu. We don't have too many koans from Shitao, but we have some koans from Baso. Baso said, "This very mind is Buddha." That's one koan we work on. Everything is mind. And then there's another koan we work on that's from Baso. Not mind, not Buddha. Well, which is it? Make up your mind. Hey, geez. So any, I don't know, maybe it's not possible to have a conversation about this, but maybe we could try. Anyone have any thing to say, a story, a comment? Yeah.
Hello. So just to go back to the brokenness that we talked about at the beginning, and I suppose there's something to be considered for nuance of language in the original language these were written in translations, and how different words have different meaning over time. But I think the brokenness is a strong word, and it seems like some of these koans choose strong language, and perhaps that's intentional because it's makes you kind of get that heartbeat going. Wow, and it causes a call to action, or perhaps a radical acceptance, which in a way is also a call to action. And I'm thinking of, if you go to your doctor and you're just really not taking something seriously, and they kind of say, if you continue to do this, you'll be dead in 3 months. And so maybe that's part of it. Sometimes strong language, I think, is powerful and important. And I think back to our reactions to strong language, we can fight, freeze, or flee. What is it? Fight, flight, or freeze. And maybe there's another one. But that's the question of how we respond to strong language.
Yes, well, I think context is everything. So if you took this out of context, you could say the strong language is violent and it causes trauma and it triggers things in people, and it's not helpful. We used a kyosaku for when I did Zen training. There's a stick that we hit people with, and I trained in a traditional way, and I enjoyed it. It kind of wakes you up when you get hit. And when we first started the Zen Center of Hawaii, we were using the kyosaku. And we were all sitting facing the wall in those days, I think. And I'm walking around black robes behind people, hitting them. And I realized very quickly that there were some people, even back then, this was the early 90s, that had trauma, physical and sexual trauma in their upbringing, and it triggered things in them, even if they didn't ask to be hit. And I was only hitting people that volunteered to be hit. But the idea was we're not hitting someone out of anger, we're hitting them to quicken your energy so you wake up. And if you just hear it, it gets you sitting up. But it wasn't helpful for some people, so I stopped using it. It's like the Rinzai way of practicing, I don't think is very useful in this culture, because there is a lot of trauma, physical and sexual. So if you trigger that in the way we're practicing together, then that's hard for that person that got triggered. So I think context is important. And I think the intention behind all of this is to give a kind of quickening, to get our attention and get us to pay attention to what's important. And we're often just kind of off. We're not quite paying attention, and sometimes we need a doctor that comes in and gives us a diagnosis. You got 3 months to live. And sometimes the Buddha is a doctor. And sometimes the Buddha is looked on as a doctor because he's giving us also a kind of spiritual diagnosis about what's actually taking place here. We're just not paying attention. We're distracted, we're frivolous, we're entertaining ourselves, we're scared. We're just afraid to show up here because what we might find is, for whatever we might find, we're just scared to show up. Yeah, I get it, it's, we all know what that's like. We all know how we dull down When there's so much chaos around us, we all contract, don't we? You know what that feels like? We all know what this feels like. We all pull back because it's just too much. It's cognitively too much to even wrap our heads around it. So we pull back, we contract. And the only problem with that is that when we dull ourselves down by all the things that we distract ourselves with, not only do we dull down the pain, but we also dull down the joy.
I just have to ask this. It's kind of going through my head. It's like, does anybody ever like kick them back?
Take them
I
up.
mean, it's like, I mean, wouldn't that be a natural? I see someone like hitting me with a stick, it'd be like,
Oh, get up
know,
and hit him back?
yeah, I mean, wouldn't that be like a,
There probably someone did that. Yeah, there had
Yeah.
to be some upstarts in the tradition that
Oh.
probably did that. But it was part
mean-
of the, you understand, it was part of the context in which they were practicing. So it wasn't viewed as a punishment.
oh, okay.
It wasn't viewed that way. No one took it as you're being punished because you're a bad Zen student.
Uh-huh.
You're just falling asleep and we're hitting you on the back to help you, encourage you to wake up.
I see.
That
I
was the
see.
spirit, and that's what I mean about context. If you
Yes.
take it out of context and you hear, oh, there was this Zen tradition in China where they beat people up with sticks, you know.
It'd be like,
This is like
wouldn't it be-
really violent. Who would want to follow that kind of a religion?
Yeah, I know, because it kind of seems like a normal response that if someone kicked you, I mean, isn't that sort of adaptive that you would kick them back, possibly? Just had to ask that, sorry.
It depends on the context that you're in.
Yeah, oh,
Context
just
is-
one other second.
Context is everything.
You know, I feel, I know this is basic, and I feel like I don't understand the context of studying koans. Like is it that you get one and then you go write and then you come back and talk? Like I know something about koans, but I think I'm missing some context there.
You mean koan study?
Yeah, yeah.
So-
I mean, just
So
more
koans
context.
arose in the Chan tradition basically from, for a long time, they weren't written down, and when they did get written down, they were usually based on conversations between a teacher and a student. And they got recorded. And then they got systematized, and then they got built into a system. So that nowadays, when someone does Zen training with a teacher in a tradition that does koan study, such as ours, we talk a lot about koans when you first start doing them, and then we slowly introduce you to the koan. And it is a setup. You come into the Doksan room to present the koan to the teacher, and then the teacher either says you got it or go work on it some more.
I can see the function of them. It's like they would help expand your thinking and give you more perspective and complexity in your thinking. It's
Well, part of the function of the koan is kind of wear down your conceptual, the way your conceptual mind is trying to nail it down. And that just doesn't work with a koan. You can't, it's more intuitive. You can't just, if you try to use logic with a koan, it's not going to work. It just, and so it's a kind of unlearning more than it is an addition. It's more of a subtraction.
interesting. Did you want this? Thank you.
I'm old enough to have had a teacher in junior high school. I remember her well. She was elderly, Mrs. Morehouse, and she always had a ruler at hand. And if she was asking questions and you didn't know the answer, you wouldn't incur her wrath. But if you were through a spitball or something, she would grab the ruler, come flying down the aisle, and whack you 3 or 4 times on the back or the back of the neck. This was a common thing.
Yeah. Was this a Catholic school?
It was not a
No?
Catholic
It
school.
wasn't a Catholic school. Well, I was going to blame it on the Catholics. Shoot.
And everybody just accepted it. It's the way it was. You misbehaved.
So again, I just want to emphasize that you know, we have koans that are violent. There's Nansen kills the cat. He cut the cat in two, according to the koan. And when I was getting ordained in the early 90s, my father had died, and my mother was still alive. And she when I told her I was ordaining with Maizumi Roshi at the Zen Center, she looked up some Zen koans, and she found this koan. And I'll never forget when we went in to see, I went in to introduce her to Maizumi Roshi. We go in and she says to Maizumi Roshi, she says, "My son's ordaining as a monk with you. What about that story about Nonsense Cat? Is he going to be going around the neighborhood killing cats?" And Maizumi Roshi, I don't remember what he said, but he was very charming. And he just charmed my mother completely and put her at ease. He said, "I assure you, I haven't yet seen him kill a cat, and I don't imagine he will." So you have Grimm's fairy tales, which are full of violence, and you know what? Kids love those stories. So there's something wild about koans. I think part of what koans do, one of the gift of koan, it's inviting us to find our wildness again. Yeah. And so I think that's a great gift of koans, but we've run out of time. We could have a whole conversation just about that. But if you create a lot of rules and domesticate everything, then you lose the wildness, and then you lose the spontaneity and the freshness of a spiritual tradition. And part of the tradition of koans, I think, is to kind of keep the tradition alive in some way that's vital and not just doesn't get turned into an orthodoxy, into a dogma. And that's a tricky thing to do with religion, because religions usually turn things into dogmas. And so Zen is trying to carry on a tradition that stays alive in a way that doesn't do that. So that's it for this morning. I want to thank you all for coming. It was lovely to have a little conversation about our tradition and okay. So thank you everyone online. Thank you all. Good to see you, Pix. Yeah. And we're going to have fellow kinship hour now, if you want to stay around. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Roshi.
Hi, Pix. How are you doing? Wait, you're muted. You're muted.
I'm not anymore. No, hi. Thanks. Yeah. Oh, it's hard to leave. I'm just still sitting here.
That's okay. I wish you were here, but you're there. That's good. That's fine.
I wish
Yeah.
I was there too. I so often wish I was there. So maybe I'll come for a visit in the summer or
That
something.
would be nice. That would be really nice. Is
Yeah.
that your artwork behind you?
Yes.
Oh my
painting.
God, what is that? That's incredible.
That Earth diaries of pieces of land looking like chunks of floating islands, But
Wow.
I thought of you through the talk when it was so good what Roshi was saying, and I found it. How I've struggled with the whole macho part of Zen, and I thought of saying something about that, as you got into talking about it, and I thought, well, you were the perfect person to actually, because if I don't think if it wasn't for you. You saved me because I knew you weren't be killing cats and things. So, but what is it? You know what? I'll have to ask Roshi. But how are you doing? Sun face, moon face? Is that
Yeah,
what?
sun face, moon face, Buddha.
I don't know why. I just burst into tears when he said that. I don't know why.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's a beautiful thing. It is a beautiful thing. Yeah.
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 So whose comment was that? I was gonna.
That's a koan. It's a koan. I think I forget which one it is, but I think I forget which one it is, but it's a Joshu koan, right? Yeah. Yeah. I'll find out. I'll let you know.
You have to go. I know you do. It's kinship time. So bless you. Bless you for saying hi. Thanks.
Okay, good. Good to see you. Lots of love. Oh, there's Fix.
Hi.
Oh,
Hi.
here.
Here
I
you.
love the moon face Buddha sun.
Sun face Buddha.
What koan is that? Do you know which one that's from?
Why do you need to know where it's from?
Well, she said.
I just was wanting not where it's from so much. It's just like, I guess more context. For some reason, I found that so deep. I just burst into tears
I'll
when you
find it
said
and
it.
email you the koan. I'll find
Well,
it.
it just hit her, just that saying. It just hit her and she burst into tears.
It's
It's
lovely.
beautiful. Yes, it is. It's beautiful.
Thanks, you too. Anyway, I was just saying, Joshin, to June, she saved me because, I've struggled. You know how I've struggled with all the macho stuff in the tradition. And the fact that June was always there, okay, she's
Saved
not.
me. She
Yeah.
saved me. I would have been unbearable without her.
It's nice you can use past tense. It's great.
Yes.
Okay, my dears. Goodbye.
Okay, bye, Fix. Love you.
You too. Bye.